Well, we've had 6 weeks with the 2 stories of creation, 1 week of the story of Cain and Abel that established the standard for community life. We are our brother's keeper. But now for the story of the flood. It's the second major story in Genesis 1 to 11. And it really represents the most significant illustration of the misrepresentation of a campfire story as history. Now, some background is helpful to understand the story. The origins of the story of the Great Flood is not just in the Hebrew culture, but it can be found in the Gilgamesh epic that we've referred to before in the Babylonian traditions. The epic of the flood was first written 1,000 years before Genesis was first composed. In 2000 BC, that epic was written, and it includes the tradition of the Great Flood. Genesis 6 to 9 is just a combination of all the written traditions in the Hebrew community put together over a period of 300 or 400 years. Now, the sequence of the story of the flood in Genesis, in the Hebrew story, follows the Gilgamesh epic, for instance, of having one individual that was sort of saved from the tragedy of the flood. And there's one God in the Hebrew tradition. In the Gilgamesh epic, there were many gods. There are differences within Genesis 6 to 9. Both names for God is used from 6 to 9, Yahweh and Elohim. The length of the flood is different. 40 days and 40 nights for a lifetime. These differences are the result of the J document and the P document sort of put together. But you see, this isn't any problem for the composers of Genesis, because they weren't trying to combine 2 stories of the flood to write history, because they knew it wasn't history. They were combining 2 stories of the flood which existed in the Hebrew people, which communicated basic principles of life, basic cornerstones that must be learned by those who hear the story. Now, most scholars agree that there were frequent floods in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley in the area of Babylon. These 2 great rivers come together, and all Near Eastern folklore refer to these epic great floods. But if we take the campfire story and try to make history about it, just think about this. If this really would have been a universal deluge, destroying all life and covering the highest mountains on earth, that means that the flood would have been 30,000 feet deep. Now, that's a lot of wawa. That's more water than exists, okay? The literal belief in the flood story marks the date of creation at 4000 BC, Noah's life at 3000. He lived for 1,000 years. From 3,000 to 1,000, there's no way all of the human races and diversity of humankind that we know existed in 1000 BC could have developed in 2,000 years. It just couldn't have happened. You see, the campfire story composed finally in 500 BC addresses some interesting questions like, why is there a rainbow at the end of a storm? Why do we cultivate vineyards? Why are there human races? Why are we all the same? Any of these, many more questions, could have been the prompting question for the story of the flood to be told. Now, the story of the flood surfaces new cornerstones to those added to the list that we've already compiled, which has dominated our Jewish and Christian history for 3,000 years. This week, we'll consider the first of three cornerstones that come out of the flood. And it's based on the prelude to the flood. And that is, left to humanity who ignore and rebel against the spiritual dimension of human existence, humanity will make a mess of God's world. When humanity abandons our spiritual dimension, our imago Dei, created in the image of God, that spiritual connection with the divine, when we abandon that, we will make a mess of God's world. Remember the cornerstone in the creation story. Humans are created in the image of God. This is the spiritual dimension of humans. The story is clear. Without the spiritual dimension, human rebellion is in full bloom. Sin and judgment is the story of humanity ignoring the spiritual dimension. All thoughts and actions are evil as humans choose evil over good, and as a consequence, bring about the destruction of the created order. Let's look at Genesis 6, 5 to 7, the prelude to the story. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And you know something? The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth. It grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the ground, man and beast, creeping things, birds of the air, for I'm sorry that I've made them. That's pretty sad. Human beings can make a mess of things, so much so that the divine is sorry. This is the cornerstone, the first cornerstone that comes out of the flood. And that is the devastating message that humanity, left to their own resources, can destroy the created order. This is the prelude to the story of the flood. Again, the cornerstone is that devastating truth that left to their own resources, humanity can destroy the created order. Raises a lot of questions for us. More than 1 week can take care of it, but we'll give it a whirl, okay? First question, what are the examples of humankind ignoring our spiritual dimension, destroying the created order? Secondly, what motivates humankind to ignore or deny the spiritual dimension of human existence? And finally, in your own journey of faith, when did you first question the historic presentation of the flood as history? enjoy your thoughts. We'll talk about them on Sunday.